Hello, everyone, and welcome to Think Like a Dog podcast, hosted by Andreia and Millie Travis. In this podcast, we discuss how to build the best relationship with your dog. From rescues to reactivity, we'll cover it all. Welcome back to Think Like a Dog podcast, and today we're doing episode 15, and we're actually going to do it a little bit different today. We're going to do some question and answer. Over the last few weeks, we received a lot of different questions from all different kinds of social media and Instagram, some emails, some on TikTok. So we've written all these down. When I say we, it's Millie. and we're going to go through this today. And Millie's going to give some feedback on this, on these questions based on what's written in here. So we have a couple different topics today. We're not just going to stick to one topic. So you're going to get a lot of different, varieties of topics in this episode. So with the first one, it is from Emma. And Emma wrote, I think owners might like to hear about reactivity versus aggression, since a lot of people equate reactive dog equals aggressive dog.
Yep. That is a very common, not mistake. It's not a mistake, but it's really common for people to say, oh, is your dog aggressive, when really the dog is reactive. So, and I do believe people sometimes say, well, it's just semantics. It doesn't matter. It's, what word you use. But I believe it matters kind of how you describe behavior, because it matters in the way that you treat that behavior. So describing a dog as reactive versus describing a dog as aggressive, you can sometimes treat that behavior a little bit differently, and the people around you are going to treat that dog differently. So in my mind, and most dog trainers are going to call an aggressive dog, which we rarely use that word, but like a aggressive dog is going to want to truly kill every single dog that they see, regardless of the situation, regardless of their environment, regardless of the dog, the gender of the dog, the type of dog, who's walking, regardless of anything, right? That's what we call a aggressive dog. A reactive dog is normally a dog that's, I actually saw on Instagram this morning a trainer describing it as a reactive dog is easily triggered, right? So it's kind of like you say something to me that, kind of touches a nerve. That's a reactive dog. Now, reactive doesn't have to mean a dog intending to bite. Reactive can be a very happy-go-lucky dog. So some of the most reactive dogs I have worked with, their intention is to play. But it's truly, they are reacting in some very big or maybe not healthy way to some sort of stimuli. But that is a reactive dog. An aggressive dog is normally a dog that either was just not at all socialized, was taught to fight other dogs, or it was a learned behavior, and sometimes it can be some sort of a neurotic behavior. But most dogs are reactive when they have a behavioral issue. And I think that that's important to kind of change that wording, because it matters in how you treat that behavior.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the example, Rusty, our foster, I would say he's reactive. He's not an aggressive dog, but because of his breed, his size, and of course that he is very scared of other dogs. When he first came to us, we could have easily labeled him as an aggressive dog.
Yeah,
because what we saw, if we didn't understand the behaviors behind that, we could easily label it as aggressive, and that would hurt him in so many ways, because then we wouldn't take the necessary steps to help him understand and cope with that anxiety that he felt around other dogs.
Yeah,
and his chance of being adopted would be zero.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to adopt an aggressive dog, and willingly just take on an aggressive dog. But a reactive dog, once you determine that difference, you're able to first look for the help you need, and then also be able to explain your dog's behavior better so other people understand it. I showed Rusty's behavior on social media clearly. I've showed him videos of him barking at our dogs. When he first arrived, his reaction was, but the words I used was, he was very scared, which that is something we determined early on. It wasn't aggression. It was anxiety. It was how much he was afraid of other dogs because of his very last interaction with a group of dogs was they all got in a fight. He got hurt. So he had that anxiety around other dogs, and he was so afraid that his main reaction was bark.
So a reactive dog can still intend to harm. That doesn't just mean that they are aggressive if the intent is to harm. But an aggressive dog can still be helped when it comes to management and when it comes to finding a way that you can live with them safely or put them navigate through the world safely. So that doesn't mean they just can't ever be around dogs. It just might mean that they need to be around dogs at a very safe distance. But when it comes to reactive versus aggressive, reactive, there is a reason for. Most of the time aggressive, there's not a very clear reason behind it.
Mm-hmm. And for aggressive dogs, you said there is a way to manage that, but is there, once they get to that aggression point and you realize they are an aggressive dog, is that just a manageable behavior, or is there a way to really get to a point where they're not as aggressive?
Yeah. So the couple cases that I've worked with are dogs that I firmly believe have some sort of neurotic kind of behavior going on. So it's bad breeding. It's, there is no reason behind it. It's all of a sudden, which I don't say. I don't ever say that the bite came out of nowhere or the dog attacked the person out of nowhere, or the other dog out of nowhere. Those cases are difficult most of the time because it's really the safety of the people and the other dogs around that dog that you have to be concerned about. But when it comes to dogs that are dog aggressive, it was 6 or 7 years ago. She was a truly dog aggressive dog, Delilah. She was this giant, gaudy pit bull. I mean, she was huge, but it was every single dog she saw from the moment she saw them, and she would not stop ever. But with her, it was a lot of hard work, a lot of baby steps. And I never came into it with the intent to to make her like the other dog. But it was more kind of what we've talked about already, making sure that she understands that I can advocate for her. I will keep the other dogs away. But there was never a time I could really get her crazy close to another dog safely.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a lot of information there, reactive versus aggressive dog. Now we're going to go on to the next question that we had. And this one is from Elizabeth. Elizabeth said, so excited that I came across your podcast. I've listened to 1 episode so far and already feel like I understand so much more about my pup and how to take care of him best. My puppy Bauer is an 11-month-old mini golden doodle. We have had a few issues with him that we are working through. When walking him, he loves to pick up garbage and anything he can find. I try my best to stay clear and keep him away, but sometimes he still gets things. He becomes aggressive, possessive when he has something, and it is impossible to get it out of his mouth without getting snapped at or possibly bit. The only thing that works is getting him to drop it by distracting him or giving him a treat. This is a huge stress and makes me worry that he will have something that is going to hurt him. I also feel like the treat method is not sustainable and not enforcing good behavior. We have a trainer and we work on obedience training, but I'm still struggling with this one thing. We'll love to hear y'all's advice. Thank you.
This is a really good question. Unfortunately, I have a lot of questions back, but we'll kind of talk it through. So my first question is, what does the walk look like that he's able to sort of just grab things? So if we can clean the walk up a little bit and make you a little bit more relevant, because my guess is if he is, in my mind, he's sort of just walking and searching for things to pick up. So your walk, and we're going to have an entire episode on the walk, but your walk is supposed to be neutral state of mind. It's supposed to be a dog who's in this kind of following state, very calm. And you are supposed to be the most relevant thing to that dog. Now we don't want a robot, but we definitely don't want a dog who kind of forgets that we're on the walk with them and is sort of searching for things to pick up the whole time. That would be my first thing that I would focus on. At the same time, I would be focusing on teaching him some sort of drop it or release command, but I would be doing that when it's not needed, right? So not when you're on the walk and he picks something up, like set aside some time to do it with his toys, where you put a leash on him, you say, drop it, pressure on the leash until he does. And then make sure that when you are pulling on that toy or whatever, well, make sure that when you have your hand on that toy, actually that you are not pulling on the toy. The more you pull on it, the more competition there is, the more of a game it is. And it sounds like he's sort of seeing it as competition if he's, kind of growling and snapping. So I think that there's some work that we need to do before we expect any changes on the walk. I think we really need to focus on, okay, well, if he can't, can I get him to drop his toy, his favorite toy in the house, with zero problems? And if I can't do that, then why wouldn't he, or why would he why would he drop something that he picks up on the walk that's new and different? And there's this expectation around that item that there is going to be competition. So I think there's a lot more work to do sort of before we see any difference there. But I mean, definitely things that we need to practice at home.
Now, would you use like Poochie is here with us now.
Poochie, that was the cutest little wave.
Now, would you do like the pressure release? Would you keep like a lead on him while he's inside the house to use that
Absolutely.
For him to learn the drop it and the, because once you're teaching a dog drop it, like she's saying, she's giving him a treat every time, like as an exchange. Now he's learning that he's doing the right thing, right?
Well, yeah, he's learning, okay, well, if I pick up this item, and I hold on to it or I back mom off of it, then she walks away and she gets me a treat. And I get to keep the item or whatever for a little bit longer and I get a treat. So why wouldn't I do that? So I do drop it with, I will say the word drop it or release or whatever out. And I will, at the same time I'm saying it, I apply pressure on the leash, not a lot, but just a little bit, and make sure that we have a clear understanding, right? And then I make sure I don't move. I'm not pulling that toy away. I'm not if my hand is on it, it's not pulling out of the mouth. It's just sort of resting there. My goal is that I want the dog to move away from the item, not me to move the item away from the dog. That's really important. So, and then the release, when they do release it, I relax my leash. So it's just simple, kind of your basic pressure and release, but I don't do treats for that. I mean, because I'm not always going to have treats. And I think we talked about this in one of the very first episodes. I use treats for probably, recall for like the first week that I'm teaching recall, but that's about it. I don't really use a lot of treats because it's not life. I'm not always going to have treats. And I also want my dog to just understand that they can't eat random things off the floor.
Now with the lead that we talk about, there is a link for the lead that we use on our social media where you can click there and then it takes you directly to the lead. And why I like the slip lead so much is that it's just like a little rope that goes around the dog's neck and you can make it rest right under their upper neck area where they really understand pressure and release. It's easy to put on. It's lightweight. They don't really feel it. Like it's not just dangling around, and you can keep this on your dog in the house while you're teaching him basic, manners. So while they're learning manners, learning how to drop things, learning that they can't be in certain rooms, you keep this on him throughout the day. They're not really going to feel it. You're not really going to hear it. It's not going to be like a loud leash or something that's going to look uncomfortable too. So it's very practical. And the other day I was taking Max to day camp, and Max had like a little bone on his mouth he didn't want to give up. And I tried, to take it out of him. And I try to use like the pressure, but I wasn't being very believable. Yeah. Like I was doing it and then I was letting go and saying, and my mistake was I was trying to pull it out of his mouth. Yeah. So he immediately thought, oh, this is my bone. And I was walking him into day camp. He couldn't possibly take that in there.
I know. I walked out to the lobby and I see Max with this giant bone in his mouth. I'm like, Max, I don't think that we're going to be able to do both, right? It's the bone or day camp, buddy.
I think he tried to sneak that in there like there's nothing.
It was
happening.
A giant bone. There was no sneaking that in there.
And then you just grabbed his lead, you put on pressure, He let go, and it took less than like 10 seconds that you did, but you did it with like, you meant that, you know? And I think the big thing is that you have to mean what you do. You can't just do it, feel bad, and then drop the lead. And then
that's a super important thing to mention though, right? Because that if you are putting pressure on and then your dog almost outlasts you, right? And you're sort of playing chicken in that moment, or, you know, you're thinking of it like that. And then you lose because you take pressure off before your dog lets the item go. You just really, not only did you let your dog know that you're going to back off and they can have the item, you really confuse the language of pressure and release, because it should be pressure on for direction and correction, pressure off, relaxation, reward. So for some people, when we teach here, right, we want the dog to sort of sit right by our side. We'll put pressure on the leash until the dog's butt hits the ground. A lot of people will do this thing where they toggle on and off of the leash. So they'll put pressure on and then they'll let it go. Pressure on, let it go. And the dog's just standing there. And the dog's sitting there thinking like, what does this pressure mean? It doesn't mean anything, because it's coming on and coming off even when I'm doing nothing different, right? So it has to match the conversation, the pressure and release. So it is one thing that if you are nervous about it, get a trainer and do it with a trainer. So then that way they can kind of let you know, how far can we push it? How much pressure are we using? Because you don't want to use too much pressure. But it is one thing that once you start it, it's really important that you make sure that you get where you want, or you sort of just took steps back for the next time you try to ask that of the dog. The only other thing that I have about this question is I would look at it. Your dog's 11 months old. Yeah. I would look at what are the resources like in the house and how freely are they given? So are there toys everywhere in the house? Is there any sort of ritual that we have to do before we eat? Or is it just we put the food down and the dog just goes for it? Are there any sort of boundaries in the house around space, around different rooms that the dog is allowed to go into? So I would look at all of that too. That would probably be my baseline, and try to make sure that I'm not feeding this mindset that this 11-month-old dog is allowed to guard items that he picks up on the walk. Cause that is a big deal in your relationship. That would be like, which it happens to me all the time, but that would be like me having something to eat and then my fiance saying that he wants something off my plate, and then I get mad at him for it, right? But it's important that your dog sees you as somebody that isn't competition for the item that they want. It's somebody who gives that item and can take items away, and when they need the item and when they don't. So that's a really big deal in your relationship, especially if you have a dog that's under a year old and guarding things from you. I would look at what are the resources like in the house and how freely are they given.
Yeah. So those steps that you take will make such a huge difference. For Max, it was the same thing with him. He's a large golden doodle, and he had that same problem. He'll pick up things, he wouldn't give it back. But after we learned the lead, how to properly use the lead, how to give him basic structure to help him understand boundaries, that really changed things for us. And like Millie said, if you're not really sure how to use the lead, we do have an episode earlier on that we talked about training tools and how to properly use them. But if you don't feel confident with doing that by yourself, that training session, usually it takes like 1 or 2 training sessions for you to learn the basic skills you need. If that. And then you go from there. It's not like once we say, look for a trainer, you're going to have to sign up for multiple sessions and it's going to be a whole thing. It will take just probably one session. I mean, for us, one session, we knew how to use it. We're like, all right, this is how to use the lead. This is how, we feel comfortable. We know how to properly use pressure with each one of our dogs. So it only takes one time for you to really learn it. And once you do, it's going to make all the difference. So we'll move on to the next question. And this one is from Mariano. And they said, I would like to start by saying that I love your podcast. I recently rescued my beautiful dog, Ellie, about 2 years ago. Everywhere I go through the house, she will follow me. It's getting to the point where I'm tripping on her. There's been times where I've actually fallen because of it. I guess my question is this normal? How can I fix it? I would also like to know where I can get more information on how to be a better dog dad.
That's a really sweet ending to that.
That is,
paragraph.
yes.
Well, okay. Normal is relative. So there are behaviors that are healthy and not healthy. I think if you are tripping over your dog because they're following you so much, then that is like the definition of not healthy, because you're going to hurt yourself or hurt the dog. I mean, one of my very first puppy clients I ever had was a long time ago. It wasn't this issue, but dad tripped over him on the stairs, and the puppy, and you see him all the time in all of my videos on Instagram, Hank, broke his growth plate because dad fell on top of him, and then dad tore his rotator cuff. So it is really important, not just for the health of your relationship, but the safety of both you and your dog, that you teach them how to respect your space. So obviously, Hank was a puppy and there's mistakes that are going to be made, but because they're puppies. But if it's been 2 years, my first question would be, has this happened from the second you got your dog home? Or is this something that has been growing over time? And if it's growing over time, I would look at why. What's going on that's making this dog feel like they need to sort of own your space a little bit more. But how we fix it is pretty, I say simple, but that's not fair because I'm a dog trainer. It is kind of surface level, okay? We teach place. So we teach the dog to how to stay in a boundary, how to stay in some sort of, whether it's a bed or a raised cot, something like that, how to stay somewhere while we sort of build on the distance that we are capable of walking away from without that dog leaving. There is a lot more information on place work on our website, on our Instagram, a lot more. It's one of kind of the 3 big things that we teach dogs, leash walking, crate work, and place work. But that would be my first thing, is teach the dog how to stay on a place that you are not super close to. You can do that even if you're just the dog's on place and you're watching TV across the room. So make sure that that's sort of your default. I would also look into crate training. I would ask this person, is Ellie crate trained? And if so, when do we use the crate? Are we using the crate only when we're gone? Or is it something that is happening when we are home as well, overnight? Where do we sleep? I would ask all of those questions. And if I got, okay, well, Ellie sleeps in bed with me. If she is constantly next to me when we're home, she's never in the crate even when I'm gone, I would say, yes, let's add the crate back in and let's do a nap in the middle of the day in the crate. Because that's time that dog is practicing being away from dad. And that's a huge skill that every single dog needs to learn, is how to cope with being alone. And know that they're not going to die. That this is not the worst thing that has ever happened to them. It's extremely important, but for your last question, where you can get more information on how to be a better dog dad, I would be very careful what you Google, because I think you can get overwhelmed and confused. You can go to our website, you can go to our Instagram, you can always ask us. We do virtual sessions. Sherry Lucas is a great resource for all of dog training. She has a ton of videos on YouTube, a ton of videos on Instagram. But I would just be very careful what you see and what you follow online, just because you can not only confuse yourself, but you can confuse the dog too, because you're doing a bunch of different training methods all at once.
Adding on, like once you get through those 3 things, teaching them place, teaching them to accept the crate, and then teaching them how to, sleep in the crate, how to go to place, how to follow your lead on the leash, then you're actually it's gonna help so much more to help Ellie understand that she doesn't need to be next to you all the time. With all my dogs, I've had different experiences with them because they have such different personalities. Some of them I have no issues with, really feeling like I need to teach them how to be away from me, because they don't really follow me everywhere naturally.
Yeah.
Like they're like
Bubbles,
Kane.
it's like really hard to get him to follow you at all.
Exactly. He's kind of like in his own world. Yeah. Kane, he'll be here and I'll be like, okay, where's Kane? Like I haven't seen him in half an hour. And my little ones, they're really good about that too. Like they can be off on their own. They're not constantly behind me.
Yeah.
But it came to the point where they didn't know how to cope with different stressful situations, like when things are going on. Like today, my mom was using like a loud cleaning machine. It wasn't a vacuum, it's like a steamer, which made a really like loud steaming noise. And Poochie gets really scared of that, and he just goes and hides. Like, and sometimes we can't find him anywhere in the house because he will go and hide
really
in like a
small too,
really
yeah.
random closet, or he'll go inside like of a suitcase if it's open, you know, like, and he's small, so you can't easily find him, and he won't bark. He won't come, you know, when he's really scared. So when we went out of town last week, my mom stayed with them, and she started to really get on the crate use. Like she got really strict with
you
the
had your
crate.
mom do that.
Yes, because I tried and I failed. I feel like my little ones are like my babies, and
We
I
should
had
do an
the
entire
hardest
episode
time.
on small dogs.
I had a really tough.
Yeah.
Like my mom was like, "How can you train all these big dogs? They love their crate. You're doing well. Why can't you do it with the little dogs?" So I went and bought 2 crates for them. Started doing it.
How'd your mom crate train them?
I put Louis in the crate for the first night, and he cried for about an hour straight. And I felt so bad. I took him out, and I'm like,
No,
I
you
failed.
didn't.
I did. I took him out.
Andrea.
I took him out. I felt so bad. I was laying it. I put his crate. I did everything right. I put his crate outside the room. I closed the door. I'm going to sleep. You're going into your crate. And then he was crying and crying. I kept looking at the clock, and I couldn't. And I'm like, I'm doing it. I opened the crate and I gave him. But thankfully, he's a very smart dog. He didn't let his mother ruin him. He continued. He actually, when we went out of town, my mom did not allow them to sleep with her.
Good.
So she put them in the crate. She let them cry it out.
Good.
And they cried it out and they slept. Like the first night, it was hard on her. But then the second night, they did really well. She called me. She's like, they didn't cry the second night. They did well.
Because they're routine animals. I mean, did you think he was going to cry the entire night?
Yeah.
Eventually, he's going to have to go to sleep.
I was worried. I was like, you know what? That's what I'm like in 2 different worlds. Like with my big dogs, I'm really strict.
Yeah.
They have crate time. They're in the crate for naps. They're in the crate during the day. They're in the crate for, during bedtime. None of our big dogs have ever had like the freedom of just sleeping freely or eating freely. I've always believed in the crate. So I've never been against the crate. It's just like my little was, I'm like, I don't feel like I'm being greedy kind of, because I want them to be on me all the time. Like Poochie was just on my lap. Like I picked him up and put him on my lap.
Right.
So
I wouldn't even say greedy. I wouldn't say greedy.
Yeah.
It's the part of the relationship that we enjoy, and it's easy to manage the outcome or any negative outcomes with small dogs. It's easier than it would be with Bubbles, right? I mean, it's difficult to walk Bubbles on a leash if he decides to really make a decision to do something, negative or something that we don't want him to do. So we've got to make sure that our relationship with him is, on point. It's easy with the little dogs to sort of manhandle them. So we can kind of make a little, and I'm not saying that that's a good excuse, but I think that that's what a lot of people think about is with the little dogs, we just can pick them up and we can either take them out of a situation that they are nervous in or that they're reacting badly in, or we can just pick them up and cuddle them for a little while and put them back down, because what are they going to do about it? Right. Yeah. Like they're not going to go out and actually truly harm somebody. Like this relationship I can fix because I'm bigger. Right. Or I'm stronger, or whatever it is. But yeah, for crate training, it is really important that if they are crying, you do not let them out, because the same thing with the drop it, or the question before with the dog who got a treat when he wouldn't drop it. It's the same thing for the crate. If they cry, you let them out. They get okay, great. I cry. Now I know if I want to get out, I need to cry for an hour at least. And then my mom will come and let me out. Yeah. But it's hard. It's hard. That's why I tell people, as soon as your puppy is done potty training, get them out of your bedroom, get them out, put them somewhere where it's harder to hear them.
It is easier to start if they're like when Louis was a puppy, he did great in the crate. And then we took that out. We took that out of his life because we felt like We made the mistake of thinking he didn't really need it. I don't know what we were thinking.
Well, he's
honestly.
a little dog. He's a little dog.
I don't know what we were thinking until he started eating pairs of shoes. And then we're like, oh, maybe you can't be left unattended. Because like Poochie we'll leave him in the house. So the problem with Poochie was he gets scared. He runs to like random places. We can't find him.
Yeah.
But today my mom was doing that machine and then I put Poochie in the crate, closed the door, super quiet. I didn't even remember he was in the crate. And I feel like he thanked me for it because he doesn't know yet to just go in the crate. Like that's not his initial instinct, but I did put him in there and he was like super fine, just laying down, fell asleep. So teaching your dog the crate, teaching them place, it really shows that over time they will show you how thankful they are for it because it gives them a place to go when they feel really stressed.
Yeah.
It teaches them that they don't have to be next to you all the time. And then depending on your dog, you add it in throughout the day. Like we're trying to do this with them where we put them in during the day. Like if I go outside, they go in the crate. If I'm doing some things in the yard, they're in the crate. As we leave the house, they're in the crate. Good. And then at night, we're leaving them in the crate and they've gotten better.
Good.
I mean, it took a week that we were out of town. Yeah. And then now they're...
that you were convenient.
I was not part of the equation. And my mom worked hard. She was updating me every day, but I told her, I said, thank you, because that was hard on me. It's put hard. Louis first. Yeah. I tried Louis first in the crate. And then I couldn't do it. And I didn't even try with Poochie, but then my mom did it. So
yeah. Well, I mean, now Poochie doesn't have to find an open suitcase to hide in, right? Yeah. I mean, it's giving them a place where they can go and they know, okay, whatever that scary machine is that she's using, it can't get me in here, or thunder, or, fireworks, whatever it is. Teaching them before those things happen. And that's exactly what your mom did. Is she spent a week saying, look, you rest in here. You rest in here overnight. You rest in here when I'm not home. You rest in here when I am home. And then when she pulled out that scary machine, Poochie was like, okay, my mom just put me in the crate. I remember I rest in here and I don't think that thing can get me in here.
Yeah.
So it's only beneficial to the dog. But yeah, I mean, for Ellie, I think it's important to focus on ways to ask her to create distance away from you in small doses. It doesn't have to be overnight, but little bit of ways of saying, hey, you go over here, I go over here, or I'm going to go to the kitchen and get a drink of water. You need to stay right there. Maybe don't stay right there, but maybe don't come in the kitchen with me. Whatever you can do, start asking a little bit more of her every single day. And I think she'll probably calm down a little bit too. But yeah, I mean, I hope that Ellie sort of finds a place to relax, because it must be exhausting following a person around all the time.
Now with the other question that we have, this one is from Jessica. Jessica said, hi, I came across your podcast on TikTok. I have a very reactive dog. I have taken them to dog training place and I feel it helped, but he still has several bad habits. 1, he eats his poop. 2, he doesn't leave my 2 cats alone, literally harasses them. 3, he follows me from room to room, no matter how many boundaries or commands I give. 4, I can't get him to focus on me when we're walking. He sees other dogs. 5, he breaks commands. If I tell him to stay, he stays for a second and then just walks away. 6, when I have people over, I have to crate him or put him outside, and that triggers his barking because he wants to be around people. Please help.
This is a lot of questions in one, but we'll break it down. Okay. So first, I'm not sure if she said, but is your dog reactive or human reactive? Because I would wonder, the reason I'm asking is because why are we having to crate him for when people come over? I don't know if that's a problem for, because the people that you have over don't want to be around the dog, or if there's some sort of behavior that's happening when he comes over or when people come over. Because my suggestion, I know I'm working backwards, but my suggestion would just be to put a leash on him. But if he's human reactive, but it doesn't seem like he would be, because it says that he wants to be around people. Maybe he wants to be around people to bite them. But if he isn't human reactive and you feel like it's a safe situation, I just put a leash on him and I teach him how to go to place and just chill out there while people are over, and teach him sort of how to be out in that situation. But But we'll go back to number one. It's the gross one though. Okay. So dogs eating their poop, it is a thing. Sometimes dogs will eat other dogs' poop. There are some dogs that can learn this behavior from other dogs. There are some dogs that just do this. There are products that you can buy, but most of the products that you buy, you have to give to the dog that okay. Let's say dog A is eating dog B's poop. If you buy that product that hopefully will make your dog stop eating it, it's dog B that you have to give the product to, because apparently these products make poop taste bad. But I would think that already tastes bad. But it can be an issue. So I mean, for people who have tried those products and they don't work, I tell people go outside with them, work on recall, work on back off, work on drop it, work on leave it, whatever it is, whatever command it is, and pick up the poop right after they go. It can be a really like exhausting kind of behavioral problem, because you can never just let them out without being out there with them, especially if you really want to get on top of this problem. But I would say put them on a leash. Same thing that we kind of talked about for the dog that was trying to eat random trash on the sidewalk. Put them on a leash, and make sure you address it every single time. Eventually, you will see a difference. It will just take a while. Number 2, doesn't leave my 2 cats alone. Another question that Place would help with. And I know we went over how to bring a new dog into the house with a cat. There's some, I can't remember what episode that was, but there are some tips in that episode for sure on if it is a dog who wants to harm the cat, if it's a dog who wants to chase the cat, if it's a dog we don't know how it's going to feel about the cat, but place work for sure. Number 3, we just kind of went over in the last question, but once again, place work, teaching the dog go, which is truly just move away from me, give me some space. It doesn't have to be because you're mad at them. It doesn't have to be because they did anything wrong. It's just asking for a little bit of respect, especially when it gets excessive. If the dog really can't stop following, turn around, walk into them and say go or back up. I can't get him to focus on me when we're walking and he sees other dogs. So I could answer this in a very short way, or, well, I can try to keep the long way short. Okay. What this question, the way it's worded, what it makes me think about is I feel like if your attempt when you're walking and he sees another dog, if you're doing things like watch me or leave it or whatever, and you're trying to get your dog to give you eye contact, I feel like you're going overboard. You're overcorrecting. I think what a lot of people miss when it comes to leash reactivity, and that, once again, kind of like the very first question, can mean a dog who wants to play with every single dog that they see, or a dog that wants to kind of bark their heads off at every single dog that they see on the walk. But I think a lot of people overcorrect that rather than just kind of keeping a short leash, looking where you're going and walking, right? I don't know that I would say I would expect a dog that is kind of barking at another dog to look up at me. That's a really big kind of turn in that moment. That's a really big ask in that moment. And at the end of the day, what I want is that dog to just kind of not care that the other dog is there. I don't need them to look into my soul while we're walking. Just let's move together. Cool. Another dog, move on. And then number 5, he breaks commands. That's that's just practice. Lots and lots of practice.
Yeah. And with the walking, it's more about like giving direction than asking him to like look at you, or just like, all right, let's go, just keep walking.
Yeah.
Like, that was a big one for us, because all of our dogs, they want to go for another dog when we're on a walk or whatever. But what the main thing that I've learned is when you have them on the leash, that's why the lead is so good. Like the lead leash, the slip lead that we use is awesome, because it gives them such great direction when it's placed right, especially with the loop, that even if they try to like pull you, if you have a big dog, then once you have them on like that slip lead and the short slip lead, you can just kind of it's so easy. Like for me, all my dogs are like 50 to 80 pounds, and I can just walk past anything because they know I'm not giving them the time to stop and react to that. I just keep walking. Yeah. And they walk with me. So like I said, my dogs are like 60, 50 pounds. They're big dogs. They have a lot of strength. But when you introduce the slip lead and the loop, super big difference. I personally don't like to take any of my dogs out, my big dogs, without the loop over.
Yeah.
Because,
especially somewhere you don't know what's going to be around. But yeah, I mean, I don't want my dog feeling like they have to stare into my eyes when they see another dog because I've trained that with a treat or I've trained that with whatever, any collar even. I want, because that can be avoidance through eye contact. That can be a dog who is sort of saying, I can't even bear to look at that dog without blowing up. And so I need to stare at you. So I teach all of my clients, just be the energy you want your dog to be. So it's look where you're going, shorten your leash. If there's a blow up, there's a blow up, and let's just move. Right. So I'm not going to give it the time of day because I want my dog to eventually to be like, cool. Yeah. Dog. Great. Let's move. It's not that big of a deal. But if I overdo it and I ask for too much, I can sometimes cue the dog into paying attention to more dogs rather than, eventually becoming neutral, which it sounds like that's kind of her goal here. But yeah, I think just trying not to overdo it with the walk. But it sounds like place work is going to help you with a lot of these, with all 6 of these, except for the walk.
She said that one thing too, that she said is like when she has people over, they're consistently barking. And I think that's like with all, like as much as our dogs go to day camp, as much as our dogs have been around like structured training, they still bark if a new person walks in the room. Like
dogs bark.
They're going to bark unless like I really stayed on them like hours every day. Like I really did a strict training, and it's possible to get your dog. Of course, it's possible to get your dog to be like super chill. Anybody walk in the room, they look at you for information. But most people that work every day and have busy schedules, you're just gonna do what you got to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with our dogs, a person walks in the room, they're gonna bark. A few minutes later, they quiet down. But it's just like we talked about previously, you have to let your dog like bark it out if they need to, and just teach them, this is where you're going to be for now. You're not getting out. You're not going to go outside. I'm not going to move you to a different room. Right. We're just going to have to deal with the barking, you know? And I think when we have guests over, they're just going to have to deal with that too. A lot of times it helps to put a crate cover over it.
Oh yeah. That's absolutely a good advice there. Yeah. Crate cover helps a lot.
Crate cover. Any crate, if you're like a regular wired crate, just get a crate cover, put it in a different room where it's not just on the living room, probably a room where it's a little bit more quiet, and then if they have any problems breaking out of the crate, if even a wired crate doesn't keep them calm, invest in a good crate, the impact crate. So impact crate, we talked about it before, but they're made for these anxiety, dogs with anxiety. And then you won't really need a crate cover because they're already covered for you and they have just the right amount of openings. So the crate there, just putting those things into it when you're teaching them the crate's going to help a lot too.
I think what you said too of, dogs are going to bark. I think that's very normal for a dog to bark when somebody comes into their home or they see something outside. Now, if the dog is barking excessively at every leaf that falls, that's a problem. But the issue I focus on is if you can't get your dog to stop, right? So if your dog barks and you have no control over, okay, yep, I heard you, I got it, and then your dog is able to go and settle down, that's where we work. So in the crate, it is one of those things, absolutely, that they do just have to bark it out. But if you have a dog who barks when guests come over or when they see something out the window, which I feel like there's a question in here about that, but I'll go ahead and answer it. But focus on teaching them how to turn off. And once again, that's place work for sure.
With the excessive barking, and if let's say her dog like really does bark a lot, like she tried to let him bark it out, tried to, keep him in the crate, try to move it, has a crate cover. Let's say all these boxes are checked. Can you touch a little bit, like what would be the next step? What can you do if that dog is an excessive barker? You tried all these things, they don't settle down. What can you implement there that's going to help them understand that they need to settle down? Like you're asking them to settle down.
In the crate? Okay.
In the crate.
Well, first thing is I would make sure that you are using the crate in other times. You're not just using the crate when you have the bug guy over, or you've got friends over. The crate is a normal thing, sort of what we talked about with Poochie. But there are bark collars, there's vibrating collars, there's stim collars. There are ways to teach that dog that is so worked up in the crate how to almost snap out of it and be able to chill out. But if that dog is barking like that every single time it's in the crate, then it's less about the people there, and it's obviously more about the crate. And that's something that you would have to practice a lot more than just when people come over, because that's not fair to ask your dog to go to this space when people come over, when this space is not practiced, or ask your dog to go to this space and be calm when people come over, when that's not, you don't practice being calm here any other time. And we've now kind of upped the intensity level of the environment. It's not fair.
With people that do decide to go towards the e-collar, I would say only use it when you're in very close to them and they can understand what you're asking.
Absolutely. Yeah. But there's bark collars that you don't have a remote for. So it'll just pick up on the barking.
Oh, okay.
But you do not buy a cheap one. Do not buy a nice bark collar, because there are bark collars. And if you have more than one dog, make sure that the bark collar you buy picks up on the vibration of your dog who's barking, not a microphone that hears other sounds and another dog barking next to it, that your dog gets a stim or your dog gets vibrated when he didn't bark. I normally, if I'm going to recommend a bark collar, I tell people, you use that just when the dog is in the crate, because I am so nervous that bark collar is going to go off because they rub on something when they're out of the crate, or, a big loud sound happens or something. And other times that your dog is out of the crate, you should be there to help that dog work through the barking. You have way more ways of dealing with barking when that dog is out of the crate. But if the dog cannot chill out in the crate, a bark collar is helpful because it gets them to that point of, oh, actually I'm okay in here. So it is helpful, but you have to buy a good one. You have to buy one that picks up on the sound of the vibration, not the sound of the barking. And you have to make sure that you are there the first good amount of times that you use that, and you are watching your dog's reaction. You know what level is sort of their working level that works for them. You're not just sort of going up to level 10 the first time that they go in there. That's extremely important. It's not just like a fix all kind of thing. You have to use it correctly, just like every tool.
If it does get to the point, I would say from my perspective, if it gets to the point where you tried everything, you've tried to implement all these different things, and it's still a problem, and you want to implement the bark collar, just schedule a training session with a trainer that knows how to use it. Because then all these questions that you have, all of the... And Poochie is part of our podcast today. We have a lot of things going on outside today, so Poochie is little.
Poochie wants to tell everyone about it.
To tell everyone about it, yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. Schedule a session with a trainer. You can do virtual sessions, but for crate stuff, it's really hard unless you are trying to figure out a nice routine for the dog. You can absolutely do that over a virtual session. But if you're looking for the bark collar and you need a trainer to tell you what's a good level, what's a good bark collar, and watch your dog's reaction, that's really important. You do something in person or take a video and ask a trainer. But it's something we take very seriously. Don't just pop a bark collar on and leave the house. Make sure you have a camera on that dog, you are watching that dog, and you are able to tell, okay, this level, they didn't care about it. This level was way too much. Where's my middle ground here? But yeah, bark collars are helpful for sure.
So, in this episode, I feel like we covered a lot of different questions. We did many topics here that, you could get a lot of good information on, but we will do a part 2 to get through some more questions. And if you do have a question that you would like for us to answer, please email us at info@thinklikeadogpodcast.com. Usually we do get questions from social media as we see them, but the best way to make sure they go to us and that we're able to really put them in an episode is if we get them via email. And now, if you really enjoy our podcast, if you've liked all of our episodes so far, if you don't mind taking the time to leave us a review, we are on all platforms. So Apple, Spotify. So that means a lot. We're going to start highlighting reviews at the end of every episode as well, just as a thank you. So, but yeah, I feel like, do you want to add anything else, Millie?
No, that's it. That's it.
All right. So in the next episode, we're going to be doing part 2 of the question and answer. And until next time, and don't forget,
practice makes progress.
All right. Until next time.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Think Like a Dog Podcast and follow at Mirror Image Canine for training tips. If you have any questions, please reach out to us via email at info@thinklikeadogpodcast.com.